America, if it keeps going this same direction, it will not be a Christian nation anymore. It will not be a free nation. It has the potential to become an Islamic or a communist nation if it keeps heading the same direction, if pastors keep being weak, if pastors don't start preaching the gospel. America will become a Muslim nation.
What's going on, everybody? I'm your guys' host, Zach Shoemaker. Hopefully, you guys are off to a remarkable day whenever you guys are tuning into this episode. My guest today is a very special guest. To give a little bit of insight into him, the modern worship movement often feels like it's a tug-of-war between performance and presence. My guest today is a man who is standing at the intersection, calling the church back to something more ancient and far more dangerous. John Sedra is the worship and creative pastor at Echo Church. He and his family have built a ministry rooted in the fires of persecution in Egypt and transplanted into the secular front lines of Sydney, Australia. He doesn't just want to lead songs, he leads a movement that challenges the lordship problem in the West. He's here to talk about his ministry, today's music culture, and so much more. Please welcome none other than John Sedra. John, I appreciate taking time to come on today.
Thank you for having me, Zach. It's great to be on the show with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, John, I know we were talking a little bit backstage. Your family's doing absolutely remarkable things. Obviously, starting out there in Egypt, transitioning now into Australia, and what you guys are doing out there, even now, possibly coming to America now as well. But I just want to hear about you to begin with, because I know there's three of you guys have done remarkable things. But for yourself, for John Sedra, how did you come to Jesus? How did you get to know the Lord and really start to decide to fully pursue Him in the ways you do?
Yeah, definitely. Well, man, we grew up in Egypt. We grew up in the Muslim nation of Egypt, where my dad was a pastor, and he was preaching the gospel in Egypt, and he preached to Muslims, he preached to non-Muslims, he preached to every type of person. And what we saw in Egypt is that we saw this deep hunger and thirst where Muslims are very desperate for Jesus. And in Egypt, like every other Muslim country, it is illegal to tell a Muslim about Jesus. It's illegal to convert from Christianity to, I mean, it is legal to go from Christianity to Islam, but it's illegal to do it the other way around. And though on paper, they might, have law of freedom of religion, in practice, everybody knows, every single Muslim country, if you live Islam, you'll either go to jail or you'll be killed by your family. That's what happens. And this is kind of the type of world I grew up in. I grew up in a world where, you go into church on Sunday on Christmas, that church can get blown up. Every Christmas in Egypt, we get terrorist attacks. We get Christians getting kidnapped for their faith. And, I haven't told this thing to people before, but if every Christian in Egypt, most Christians, when they're a kid, they get this little cross tattoo. I don't know if you can see it on my MacBook camera, on their wrist. And the reason we get that is because it's a bit of an ancient Coptic Christian tradition where young Christian kids would get kidnapped when they're kids and they get converted to Islam. And the reason many Christian parents, they tattoo their kids, like I literally got that when I was 3, man. I got a tattoo at 3 years old in front of the church. And I remember it really hurt. And I didn't know why I got it. But because if you get kidnapped, if you get converted to Islam, you would know that you come from a Christian background, that you come from a Christian family, and that Jesus is your God, not Allah or some false prophets. This is the world we come from. And God has, we've seen God move in our life across Egypt, here in Australia. And one of the testimonies we always tell people is how God moved in our lives in Egypt. My dad, he converted this woman to Christianity. She was Muslim, and her husband, he was one of the leaders in the terrorist group called Muslim Brotherhood. I don't know if you heard of it. I'm pretty sure you guys got some of them in the U.S. now for some reason, and somehow it's actually just a side note. That group has been made illegal in most Arab countries and Egypt, but for some reason it's still legal in America. I'm not sure why. This Muslim Brotherhood group. So anyway, so this guy from the Muslim Brotherhood, he made a planned to kidnap me and my older brother Andrew, who's the pastor of our church. You would know him, and he made a plan to kidnap us and behead us, cut our heads off, because his wife became a Christian, and he was angry at my dad, and he wanted to get revenge. So he would come to our house in the morning. You know, he would spy. He would figure out what time would go to school every single morning, and then he made a plan. And he came with two of his friends, in a van. And the plan was, as we were walking down the stairs, walking to the bus stop, kidnap us, behead us, send our heads in a bag to my dad to teach him a lesson. And what happens at the first time he comes with his two friends from the Muslim Brotherhood terrorist group. And as we're walking down the stairs, walking to the bus stop, and the moment we get out and we're walking there and we're about to get on to the bus, they try to get out and kidnap us, and they could not move. None of them could move. They could not leave the van. The three men stood still in shock and had no idea what to do.
Wow.
Until the yellow bus, went to school, and they couldn't move again. The guy was amazed. He didn't know what was happening. He was shocked. They had a fight. They were like, "Why don't you get them, you coward? What happened?" And just to give you a bit of context, these Muslim Brotherhood men, they are professionally trained killers. They kidnap police, have killed police officers. For them, two kids at the age of 5 and 7 or 5 and 9 is nothing. So he comes back again with two different men. And this time they try again, but this time they feel a force tie their hands behind their back. And they couldn't move. Until we got on the bus, they could move again. The guy was shocked. He was amazed. He didn't know what happened. And we had no idea about this happening, by the way. We were just kids. We were going to school. My dad had no idea somebody's trying to kidnap his kids. And until one day, my dad was preaching in a house church, because, you know, in Egypt, it's illegal. You can't just start a church. It's illegal. The government, you have to be approved by the government. So basically illegal to start a church. And when he was preaching, he saw this man at the back that looked like he has just been freshly shaved. He just shaved his beard, and he had a mark on his forehead. This dead skin mark on his forehead. And if you ever see that mark on the forehead of a Muslim, you know that they're very serious, devout Muslim, most likely terrorist. If they have that mark. And the reason is they basically rub their heads against the concrete floor, and it creates this mark to show that you pray a lot, that you bow to Allah a lot. So my dad knew exactly who the guy was before the guy even came to him to talk. And the guy goes up to him after the sermon, and he says to him, "I tried to kill your children. I tried to kidnap them. I tried to cut their heads off. But your God saved them, and your God is the one true God. And I want to be a Christian. Me and my wife and my children, we want to get baptized, and we want to become a Christians."
Wow.
So that's the world to come from, man, where God does miracles, where God moves, where Christian persecution is happening till this very day. Christians get kidnapped, killed, and it's unlike the Christianity we have today in the Western world.
You know, that's a huge segue point I want to get into, because I actually just had a couple weeks ago on Open Door CEO, obviously doing great work going around, you know, helping the persecuted Christians. And he talked about so many stories of just things, whether it be in China, the Middle East, so many places where, you know, Christianity is not as free as it is per se in the Western culture. And I just am curious what your take might be on this. And that is, I asked him the same question. It was, you know, we see and we hear these extraordinary miracles, similar to what you just talked about right there. And these are happening. We're seeing dreams that people are having and converting to Christianity. You know, this list could go on forever. And yet we look at the West, and it's not saying God is not at work. He is at work in many great ways. But some of these just extravagant miracles, if you will, we don't see it happening as often. Is that a reason? Like, why do you think that could possibly be? Why are we seeing some of these incredible miracles happening in some places as opposed to as much in America or the West?
Well, I'll tell you what, like, in the Bible, it said that Jesus couldn't do miracles in his hometown because of their unbelief. And I think whether or not you see miracles is not dependent on God or whether he can do it or wants to do it. It's dependent on the faith and the reception of the people. And today we have this brand of Christianity in the West, in Europe, in Australia, here in America, this totally new, different brand of Christianity that is not the Christianity that we have in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, after Jesus went to heaven. This was not the Christianity of the Bible. After Jesus went to heaven, he told his disciples to go into all the world, preach the gospel to all creation, and they started in the Middle East, and they, from Israel to Egypt to Syria to Rome, and they spread around preaching the gospel. And back in those days, for the first 300 years of Christian history, you being a Christian meant you were going to get killed, meant you were going to get thrown to the lions, you were going to get burnt, as Nero did it for fun, to watch Christian get burnt. You're going to get thrown to the lions, you're going to get crucified, you're going to get beheaded, you're going to get skinned, you're going to get speared. And it meant that you're willing to die for your faith, you're willing to die for the gospel. This was the first 300 years of Christianity, until 312 AD, when Constantine, the emperor, became a Christian and he legalized Christianity. You no longer got killed for Christianity. And from there, and the Christianity we have today in America, Europe, Australia, this is not the Christianity, this weak, soft, and woke Christianity. This is not the Christianity of the Bible. And historically, this is not Christianity. We have churches today that have made up this new soft gospel that only preach the parts of the Bible that they like, and they don't preach what they don't like. They only like to preach grace, they like to preach love, they love to preach acceptance, but they don't like to preach repentance, they don't like to preach sin, and they don't like to preach about anything that's going to make people feel a little bit offended and a little bit uncomfortable. Because why? Because we want people to come back to church. We want to feel bums on seats, and we don't want people to feel uncomfortable. When back in those days, you becoming a Christian meant that you could lose your life. So this is not the Christianity of the Bible. And if you can't preach the gospel, if you can't preach the truth in a free world where you have the freedom of speech, you guys in America, you have amazing constitution, freedom of speech, the only nation in the world that has this constitution and the freedom of speech. You guys have it there. Yet churches are still afraid. Churches are still afraid to speak the truth. If you can't speak it in a Christian nation like the USA, how will you preach the gospel and speak the truth and stay a Christian if persecution happens?
Mm-hmm. And I brought that exact point up actually in the interview I was just talking about. I said, we go through Matthew 24, and we know what the end times will prevail. We know there's going to be, and Jesus says that there will be a lot of Christians that will turn away from him at that time. Why? Because persecution's coming. We all know nobody necessarily wants to die a brutal death, but he says it's going to come, and he said many people will turn away. And I proposed this question to Dan, and he said, at the end of the day, people in China, in Nigeria, in all throughout Africa and Middle East, these people are already dealing with that persecution. Will some of those be the ones that turn away? Sure, maybe. I don't know that answer, but I personally don't believe that many in the West are ready for that. Now, some obviously will be, but when you talk about that, how do we fix this? Because I personally see it so ingrained in society today where there are great churches. You guys at Echo is remarkable as one of them. Philip Anthony Mitchell is doing great things, and obviously can go down this long list. There are great pastors. I don't want to say everyone's bad, but as we said at large, there is this ingrained culture that is not healthy. It is not biblical Christianity, as you talked about. How do we fix this?
Well, I think to fix it, we'll first have to identify the problem and speak a little bit of reality, right? Let's do a little bit of a reality check. So Islam is growing in America.
Yeah.
America is birth rate is below replacement rate, which means give it enough time and Christianity, the white Europeans will, become the minority. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. Muslims can have 4 wives. They're immigrating across the West. Here in Australia, where I live, it does not feel like Australia anymore. I feel like I live in Pakistan or something, bro. I'm not joking with you. UK, you seen what's happening in the UK. UK is becoming a Muslim nation. And America, if it keeps going this same direction, it will not be a Christian nation anymore. It will not be a free nation. It has the potential to become an Islamic or a communist nation if it keeps heading the same direction, if pastors keep being weak, if pastors don't start preaching the gospel, America will become a Muslim nation. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history. So Egypt, where I come from, when you think Middle East, when you think Egypt, the first thing that comes to mind to you is Islam, right?
Right.
Well, Egypt was a Christian country, believe it or not, for not even 300, more than that, almost 600 years of the first, since Jesus went to heaven, Egypt became a Christian nation. It was over 90% Christian. It was as Christian or more Christian than America is today.
Wow.
And even a lot of the theologians that wrote the Nicene Creed you'd be familiar with, they were from Egypt, or Egyptian theologians. They were actually sending missionaries out to Europe to tell the Europeans and the English about Jesus. Because you have to think about it. Jesus was in Israel. Israel's right next to Egypt. The Gospels Christianity starts in Israel. It goes out to Egypt, to Syria, to Turkey, Constantinople, Rome, and Christianity. People associate it with the West and Europe, but it didn't start in Europe, obviously. Jesus was a Jew, right? And what happened is that in 600 AD, Islam popped on the block. Muhammad, the false prophet, claimed to have received a revelation from an angel who was a demon, and he started preaching for 12 years peacefully about his new God, Allah. And within those 12 years, he only managed to convert about 100 people. A lot of them were with his family. Nobody really took him seriously. He wasn't very successful. What he did, no one believed him, and it wasn't really going well for him until he changed his strategy after that, and he went from a peaceful preacher, and he became a warlord. Yeah. So rather than going to preach, he immigrated to a place called Medina, which is which means city. He immigrated to the city, which is basically, and he immigrated peacefully there until he built enough followers, and then he switched from peaceful immigration to sword and taking over by force, and which is an ancient Islamic strategy of conquering and conquest. And we've seen many nations, over 50 nations have fallen to Islam. And though the Islamic immigration today seems very peaceful, very quiet, it is only a matter of time when there's enough followers, when there is enough numbers, where it will go from peaceful to violent. And we're already seeing it here in Australia. We just had the Bondi attack, where 14 Jews were killed by 2 Muslim jihadis, 2 Muslim immigrants. And we had hundreds of people at the city of Sydney shouting gas at Jews. And you're already seeing the true colors of Islam, the true spirit of Islam, the spirit of violence. And though it might seem like peaceful immigration at the beginning, it's gonna be a matter of time where it's gonna turn from peaceful immigration to conquest. And that's what Muhammad did. He started with peaceful immigration, and then it ended up with full-on conquest, and he conquered all of Arabia, all the Arabian tribes, by sword. He killed anybody who disagreed with him. And the Islamic religion in that time, it was very appealing to men. Why? Because it promised men three sinful desires as they could have. One, they could steal. Where any city, town they could raid, they would steal the money, they would steal the gold. They can take it. You can steal. Number 2, sex. They could rape any person from the raid, any infidel, which means anyone who's not a Muslim. You can rape in that. Take them, even if they're kids, you take them as your sex slaves. Right. And 3, it promised them power. You get to kill. You get to become powerful. So it was very appealing to the sinful desires of men. And that's why I was very successful, especially among the Arabian tribes that were pagan and barbaric. Right. And from there, spread within 100 years of Muhammad's death. Islam had conquered 75% of the Christian world. Let that sink in. 75% of the Christian world that was evangelized, by Mark, Matthew, Peter, Paul, and all the apostles, 75% became Muslim. And the 25% that survived Islam was Europe. You guys were the 25% left over that survived. And that's a little bit of history of Islam for you. And so just so you can get a little bit of a wake-up call, if America does not wake up, if Europe does not wake up, Europe is already turning Muslim. UK is already turning Muslim. Australia is already turning Muslim. And if America is the last standing beacon of light, beacon of hope, and if Christians are weak, if pastors are weak, if they don't stand their ground, if they don't speak the truth, if they don't fight for the truth, fight for their children, their family, and their nation, it will become Muslim, and America will fall as they abandon Jesus.
Everything you said right there, I think is critical because, and I get this standpoint, but a lot of people will say, okay, there's this white guys coming up and they speak about Islam and want to neglect Islam and all these things. I can get it. For someone that's not a believer, someone that's on, not really understanding this whole concept, I can see that point of view. But I think you obviously have experienced it. You've experienced what living in that type of lifestyle, that world is like.
Yep.
You experience those things. Obviously, that's part of it. So I think people can maybe understand and kind of resonate with you a little bit more than myself or others can. And so I kind of want to propose this other question for you. You have lived there. You know what it's like to live in Egypt. And obviously, I know it's a little bit different. Each one of the Middle Eastern, they have a little bit different variations. But generally speaking, you have experienced an Islamic nation.
Sharia
What
law,
is
yeah.
so bad? Like why should people be, I don't necessarily always want to say afraid, but, obviously be very worried about it. Obviously want to go put up guard, prevent it probably is the best word. Why should that be the approach that other Christians here in
Why,
the
why
West should
should
have?
why should you not want to live
Right.
in a Muslim country? It's a great question. Thanks for that. So Sharia law, what's Sharia law? It's an Islamic law made by Muhammad and the Quran. What's Sharia law? If you are not a Muslim, there's two options you have. If you're an infidel, if you're a Christian, a Jew, an atheist, anything that's not a Muslim, you have two options. Either you pay a high tax called jizya to the Muslim government until you run out of money, or you get killed. So you got those two options. Basically, if you're a Muslim, once you're a Muslim, you're not allowed to leave Islam. And you're going to get persecuted. If you're gay, for all my gays for Gaza, you'll get killed. If you're a feminist, they're gonna cover your face, they're gonna cover your head, and your husband can have 4 wives, and you're not allowed to leave the house, and your husband's gonna beat you up. And Sharia law has been applied all across the Middle East. You can see it in Iran. You've seen the women covered, and if you have sex outside of marriage, for all my grace people, they're gonna cut off your little thing. So that's Sharia law for you, man. So unlike America and Christianity, we believe in freedom. We believe in freedom of religion. You don't have to follow Jesus. It's a choice. You can decide to follow Jesus, or you can go your own way. We're not gonna force you. We're not gonna kill you. We believe in freedom.
Right. In terms of the Middle Eastern countries, obviously, I said there was a little bit differentiated. They all have Sharia law, but obviously, I know there's some
The different variations.
Right.
Some are more on the moderate, some on the more extreme.
Right.
But one thing they all have in common is that you cannot leave Islam or you
Very
die.
good point.
And if you're a Christian, you're getting persecuted.
When you do look at, obviously, the ties with America, we have seen a lot of things grow in terms of UAE. I know they become a good ally, so has Saudi Arabia, those type of things. Obviously, in part, looks good today. Now, like I say, I know my dad always told me when I was younger, you need to learn history not because it's fun and educational and you have to enjoy it, but so you don't repeat history. And I think we look at a lot of things like that, like he's talked about. What they have done throughout history is they come peacefully and things quickly change over time. And that is something that always to be kind of a red flag. So when you do look at that and you see the alliance that America forms with countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, all the Gulf countries, essentially,
Yeah.
Is that something to be concerned about, or are those countries better off? I know obviously the law-wise, they're a little bit better off than Iran and those type of countries, but
Mm.
where do you stand on that aspect?
Well, I'll tell you this. Well, these countries, they are progressive outwards, but they are dictatorial inwards. They act
No.
all progressive outwards, they act like they're all free, but inwards, they are not progressive. They are dictatorial. Saudi Arabia is dictatorial,
Mhm.
UAE, and every single one of those countries you just mentioned, a Muslim is not allowed to leave Islam.
Right.
The only country in the Middle East that you can preach the gospel and you can change your religion without getting killed, without getting in trouble with the government, in Israel. For all my anti-Jew hater guys, for all my Israel haters, what's your better option? Give me one country in the Middle East that you can preach the gospel on the streets and convert a Jew to Christianity, convert a Muslim without it being illegal. I was in Israel last year. I was preaching the gospel on the streets, and I was not afraid for my life. I was not afraid for my neck. Nobody tried to kill me. Nobody tried to hurt me. And it's the only place in the Middle East where Christians are treated best. You can have all your criticism for Israel, but the fact is, if I was in Gaza, if I was in Palestine, I wouldn't have my head on my body.
Right. When you do talk about, like I said, the alliance that kind of are formed with America, is that something to be worried in that regard in terms of, having these type of people come into our country and kind of have that relationship, or on a political scheme, is that okay?
Okay, so no, let's talk immigration first. So number one, you can call me radical all you want. I believe you should not allow Muslims in America. Full stop. Very simple. If your belief system is so good, why does your country suck, right? If your religion works, if your God is the one true God, why is your country a crap hole? Why does nobody want to go to Iraq? Nobody wants to go to Egypt. Nobody wants to go to Iran. Nobody's at the border of Iran. Oh my gosh, let me in. Because Islam doesn't work. It's a barbaric, demonic, and disgusting religion. Every Muslim country you go to is disgusting. And nobody wants to go there. And now let's talk. So yeah, immigration-wise, don't let them in. If you like your religion so much, stay there. If you're gonna come to America, you need to have American values. You need to love the country. You need to love America. You need to worship the God of America. And you can't hate America. You can't burn the flag. Islam by nature hates America. Why? Because America's Christian. That's why every single country, Muslim countries, every single Muslim hates America. They burn the American flag. They want to go there. They want the blessing, but they don't want the blesser. They want to enjoy the blessing of Christianity, the blessing, the prosperity that comes from Christianity, but they don't want the God of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so that's immigration-wise. Don't let them in. Full stop. They shouldn't be in. They shouldn't be there. Do not pollute the culture, the Christian culture. Because what makes America great is Christianity. Let's be honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every single nation they're trying to immigrate to, nobody's trying to immigrate to China. Nobody's trying to immigrate to Korea. Nobody's trying to immigrate to Russia. Every single nation they're trying to immigrate to is for some reason built on Christian heritage. Canada, Australia, UK, Germany, America, they're all Christian countries. They're all built on Christian heritage. For some reason, all the blessed, successful countries are Christian, and all the crap countries are Muslim. So, if your religion is so good, if your God is so real, then maybe it should have worked, but it didn't. So, so don't come if you don't have American Christian values. Very simple. And when you invite them in, you end up with 9/11. You end up with terrorist attacks. You end up with, all these terrorist attacks that are happening here. We just had the Bondi attack a few months ago, half an hour from where I live. And yeah, it's real. And talking external political alliances, honestly, I'm not a politician, and I don't know, but I think Trump is a smart businessman, and I think he knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't talk political strategy wise, but honestly, as long as you're not letting him in the country.
Okay. Now, I would say one of the aspects is you do look at somewhere like Dubai, and I think that's one of the only Islamic nations that has had immigration to some extent. Obviously, have had this
Yeah.
popularity, a popular
Mm.
trend about it. Why do you think that is? Like, what about them? I know Riyadh as well to a certain extent, much less than
Because
Dubai, Abu
because
Dhabi.
they're acting less Muslim.
Gotcha. So to
Because
attract people, and you say then?
they're trying to become more progressive, and they're acting less Muslim, and
Mhm.
that's why the less Muslim you become, the more successful you become.
Do you think they'll ever switch over then, or do you think this is a
Also,
proven game plan?
one more thing
Hmm.
about those successful Muslim countries. The only reason they're successful is not because they're smart. They just have oil. Let's be honest.
That is true.
Let's be honest. You got nobody gave you like you didn't invent the iPad, bro. You didn't invent iPhone. You didn't invent Tesla. You're not that smart. You're pretty barbaric. You're not that. You're still wearing a flipping white. I don't know from 600 AD, bro. You're not that smart. You just have a lot of natural resources and you're selling that. So that
That's a
doesn't
good
count
point.
as smart. That doesn't count as smart. That's just God's blessing, bro.
That is a great point. All right, the last thing I do want to get into on this discussion, though, is you said something in the very beginning about your testimony, and I thought it was very shocking. Now, I was well aware of it, but I don't think many people are, and that is in regard to the Muslim Brotherhood. And for those that aren't familiar, obviously that is a terrorist organization, which, as you said, has been outlawed in the Muslim countries. Yet we have
Yeah.
not outlawed that in America. And so, for people that are trying to resonate with that, yes, there are countries that allow terrorist organizations. They don't allow that one. Yet we do. What is the Muslim Brotherhood for those that do not know, and why or how did this even come to be where America, in a sense, allows them?
So the Muslim Brotherhood, they are basically as radical as Islamic jihadis get. Like every Muslim country, there is generally like a moderate Muslim government member. By moderate, I don't mean very moderate. Like they'll put you in jail,
Yeah.
but they'll torture you, potentially kill you. But they're a little bit more moderate, than your terrorist ones.
Mhm.
For Palestine, whatever Gaza, they have Hamas in Gaza. In Egypt, it's Muslim Brotherhood. They got there's other countries. They have ISIS. They have Al Qaeda,
Right.
and they are they are the most Muslim of them all. My favorite Muslims are the ones that don't follow the book, because if they did, they would be acting like ISIS. If they, because everybody says, oh, they're just radical Muslims, bro. I'm like, they're not radical. They're just Muslims. They're
True.
just following their book. They're doing exactly what Muhammad did, and
Mhm.
they're just following their book. So yeah, so Muslim Brotherhood, terrorist organization, they're actually the one that fund Hamas. They're the one that created the group Hamas that
Mhm.
did October 7th, that put babies in the oven, that raped women, that killed families and children,
Yep.
and killed 1,400. I forgot the number, but yeah. So that's the type of people you're dealing with. They, yeah, they are Muslims like ISIS, the guys and the Al Qaeda that did the 9/11.
So how do you think this has come to be where, or why do you think it is that America won't get rid of them? Why would they not make them illegal, not make them a terrorist organization
Well,
while they do that for so many others?
Well, there is a weird, unholy alliance between the radical left and the radical Islamist. And the reason they're allied is because, not because they have the same values. I mean, if you think about it, their values are pretty similar. Um,
Yeah.
they both have a common enemy, and that common enemy is America. That common enemy is Christianity. That's why you have gays for Gaza and chickens for KFC and all that type of stuff. The reason they get well so well. How does Zohar Mandani, the Muslim mayor, the communist Muslim mayor, get along so well with the gay and LGBT? Very simple, common enemy, and that common enemy is Christianity. That common enemy is America. That common enemy is the West, and they want to destroy the Western civilization. The Democrats hate America, and they want to destroy the Western civilization. They want to destroy the family structure, the dad and a mom and a kid.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, at the end of the day, demons get along together. There might be a different type of demon, but they get along, and they have the same spirit, and that spirit is spirit of the Antichrist.
Mm. Now, for yourself, as we talked about, you grew up living in this Islamic nation. You grew up with all these different aspects of having to go through persecution. You, your brothers, your family, all this stuff has happened to you. And I think in a certain way you look at that, it's almost turned to now being a blessing in disguise for you guys. If you didn't have that, your
Mm,
eyes would not have been open to the extent it would. And at the same time, I talked about earlier, it's different. For
mm,
someone like myself or another white guy wants to stand up and just preach against Islam, I get why so many
mm,
people that don't see our point of our viewpoint would say, "Well, you're just why you never experienced it." You have that unique ability where
mm,
you can understand it more than I ever will be able to. And so, would you
mm,
say that you look back now and even going through the stuff you guys had to go through, it became a blessing in disguise for God's purpose and your
mm.
guys' mission?
1000%. I believe God saved us for a reason. God brought us out of Egypt for a reason. God saved us to come here to Australia, to America, to the West, and to warn them of what will come if they abandon Jesus, if they abandon Christ, the God of their ancestors. And there's a great warning, there's a great warning. If a nation abandon the Lord, that nation will fall, and that nation will be destroyed. And I believe God used that testimony, used that us being there to come here and warn the West about what will happen if they abandon the Lord their God and if their nation becomes Muslim. Because one of the crazy things is that the West just didn't understand Islam. They don't know what it is. They don't know
Agreed.
what it does. They have no idea. They say it's a religion of peace. What peace are you talking about? When when over 90% of all terrorist attacks in the world are done by Muslims, over 90% of all Christian persecution and getting killed in the world, Islam. What peace are you talking about?
Yep. When you talk about forming Echo Church, and I think it's a beautiful thing for those that are not familiar. Obviously, they're doing remarkable things in Australia. You have the transition now even to America, just a growing, thriving church right now. But I want to go all the way back to how this started because it's a family-ran church. You guys have been together growing up, and not only is it just an ordinary church, it is a remarkable church that's having great success right now. So I just want to look at it from that aspect. How did you guys come together and make this idea of saying, let's create Echo Church, let's go out there and do this together? And now seeing the success that God's blessed you guys with as a family unit running this, how unique and how special is that?
Well, we used to go to a church that was, like your average, mega work week church that does not preach the gospel. And we used to go there, and in 2017, we felt God's call telling us, this is not it. This is, um, you got to go. You need to start a church. So we obeyed and we followed that call and we started a church. And it was very small for a very, very long time. For 7 years, we were preaching, we're working hard. It wasn't till COVID in 2020 when we started, doing more online things, which we were kind of forced to because of the lockdowns.
Right.
Here in Australia, we had some crazy lockdowns. They locked us up for 2 years,
Wow.
which is crazy. Back in America, you guys had it good, man. You guys have freedom. Here, we don't have freedom, so they locked us up for 2 years. And what the enemy meant for evil, COVID, lockdowns, and all these churches here shutting down and going bankrupt, God used that season for good. And in that season, our church exploded, and not just in person, but our online presence exploded across the USA, across different places. And God just every year kept adding to our numbers, kept increasing our influence. And, my brother Andrew, he got the honor to be preaching at Turning Point, America Fest with Charlie Kirk. My brother Martin was just on Pat PBD, Patrick Pitt David podcast a couple of months ago. And God has increased our influence tremendously as we just kept preaching the gospel and speaking the truth. And the reason, I believe it exploded is because the Bible works, the gospel works. You don't need to make it pretty. You don't need to decorate it. You just need to preach it, and it works. And we live in a world where people are so hungry. They're so desperate. They're so hungry for the gospel. They're hearing a lot of fluff. They're hearing a lot of fake half gospels, and people are just desperate. And when you preach the gospel, it works.
Would you say it's an accurate claim? Because I would say right now there is a revival and assault happening in the West. We see so many kids around my age of college that
Mm.
are, like you said,
I heard,
hungry. And I
yeah,
think one key thing right now is, okay, that revival, that hunger is key, but then who's going to shepherd those people? Because if they're
that's a
shepherded by
great,
the wrong people,
that's so
they won't
good.
be ready. And so my
That's
biggest
really good.
thing, I agree, and I think the biggest thing is this: is who are those people shepherding them? And I think one of the biggest things is whether people like it or not, people my age are on social media. It is the fact of the reality, and I think when you see their feeds being filled up with guys like Philip Anthony Mitchell, all three of you guys over there, and the list goes on. Those type of people that are preaching truth, I think that's huge for a lot of people. And so, would you say that seeing the success you guys have had, a church like what Philip Anthony Mitchell is doing out there, and others along those lines, is that kind of a keynote to say, okay, we're maybe heading in the right direction right now that kids are thriving for the true biblical truth?
Well, God in His grace, He's turning Gen Z. Gen Z are more religious and hungry and searching for God than ever.
Mm,
There's just a huge hunger, especially, I remember after the assassination of Charlie Kirk
yeah.
last year, you know, we churches saw revivals. I don't know about you guys in the US, but I heard that week, that month, churches were full. And that revival didn't just happen in the US, but we felt it here. That same week, we had the biggest church service we have ever had in the history of our church.
Wow.
And most of the people coming were young people that are hungry, that are thirsty, and they're looking for answers. They don't understand what's happening. The world, whatever the world's given them, is not working, and they're hungry. But here's the thing: God is sending the people. God is bringing the revival. But the question is, are churches ready to disciple these people? Are
Mhm.
churches ready to give these people what they need? Are churches ready to handle the revival that God is sending? And that's what the question we need to be asking. Are churches ready?
Mm,
Because God can send all these sheep, but if you don't have a good shepherd, they're going to lead them astray.
mm. So to ask you that same question, at large, not just saying a couple of churches, at large, including every church in the West right now, are the churches ready?
If you want my honest opinion, I
Mhm.
think most churches aren't ready.
Agree.
There are a few remnant churches across the U.S. Hardly any churches in Australia. You have almost nothing here. It's a very dry and barren land. UK, dry. Europe is gone, bro. I'm being honest with you. Europe is gone.
Mm,
Europe, they need a revival. We need to do something there. But churches in Europe are flat, they're dead, they're weak, and they work. America, there are a few good churches. There are a few remnant, there are a few people that are preaching the truth. My brother just preaching at Ed Young's church in
mm.
Texas. What an amazing church, an amazing pastor. And there are a few remnant pastors, but I would say most of them are not ready.
Mm, actually, 100% agree with that. We've talked about a few things that you've been able to experience full on. Another one of those aspects is the worship aspect, and that's actually how I came
Mm,
across you. Is you had a viral post go out there talking about secular music, and I've been outspoken about this from a personal
mm,
testimony. For those that are not familiar with it, like I came to Christ. Well, I've always grown up in the church and knew Jesus, but 2022, I really fully committed to Him and walked away from my old lifestyle. And one of the first things that was pornography. That was the first thing I had to remove from my life,
mm,
but in a weird way, the hardest thing for me that took the longest to get rid of, that was more of a one night stopping kind of thing. It was music. And I think that so many people
mm,
don't understand the influence that has on you. And what convicted me was as I was
mm.
going through, I always felt it was wrong. But you read about King David and Saul, and Saul obviously is going through this time where he's facing demons and all this wild stuff, and God brings music to be the thing that actually impacts him and kind of relieves those demons from him. And I think you just see
Yeah,
throughout Psalms and in the whole book of the Bible, chapters in the Bible and books in the Bible talk about music. You spoke on that. I thought it was key that some people just don't realize. They turn on the
yeah,
radio and it's the song that maybe isn't cursing or talking horribly, but it still has demonic things in it. And I want you to kind of elaborate on
yeah.
that because worship, that is your job, that's what you
That's right.
work with.
That's right.
How powerful is music at large?
Well, before I go into that, I just want to tell you a testimony I haven't told to anybody before.
Okay.
But before I ever did worship, before I was ever called to worship, before I ever heard God's voice say, hey, I need you to lead people to my presence,
Mm-hmm.
I had this long playlist of worldly, secular music. I
Mm-hmm.
just loved listening to music. Loved the way it sounded, the way it felt. And, I was listening for the vibes. It felt good.
Yeah.
Until one day, I got this conviction and I deleted all these songs and I replaced them. I made like this new worship playlist was like 1,000 or a few hundred songs.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't till I did that I felt God speak to me and call me to the worship ministry.
Mm.
And that's how powerful it is. It changed the direction and trajectory of my life.
Right.
I went from just that kid in high school that just liked to listen to music. And before I ever led worship, I just started listening to worship. And it was so powerful, it changed the entire trajectory and direction of my life towards ministry, towards worship, and it changed my life forever. And um, you have to be careful what comes in, right? A lot of people, oh, I don't want to sin, I don't want to watch porn, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that, I just can't help it. But they're letting rubbish in.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need to stop praying about not sinning and you need to just watch what comes in, right? You have to.
100% agree.
I remember this song when I was a kid. It's very simple, but it's very real. It said, oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. What movie are you watching?
Yep.
What crap are you watching? Because whatever you're watching, you're going to become. It's going to subconsciously go into your mind. It's going to go into your heart, and you're going to live it out.
Mm-hmm.
And people today, they're watching rubbish. They consumed with rubbish. They're making their kids watch some rubbish, and they're surprised when they come out like the world. They're surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Why does my kid do that? I'm like, because because of what they're watching, because of what they're listening, because of the music you're playing. What comes in is going to come out,
Right.
whether you like it or not. And because you have to understand, that music, that Netflix show, that movie, the purpose of it is not entertainment. I know they tell you that, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of it is very simple: indoctrination. The devil wants to indoctrinate you. He wants to indoctrinate your children. He wants to indoctrinate your family. And every time you watch that stuff, you're allowing it into your mind. You're allowing it into your heart. You're meditating on it. And that's eventually, you're going to live it out. What comes in, comes out. It's very simple. Any gym guy will tell you, whatever you eat, it's going to come out. You can't eat pizza and expect to look healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just common sense. It's a common sense principle. Whatever comes in, comes out.
Yep. I think that's huge to say that because older generations, they won't fully understand it because I think you talk about, the old saying was whoever you surround yourself with, the top 3 or 5 people, whatever it is, they're going to become a lot like. That is a very true statement, not saying they're wrong.
Yeah,
But in today's generation, my generation of 35, 30 and under, whatever you want to call it, what are they with more than probably anybody in their life? It's the phones, it's the technology. They're filling music up. It wasn't before, you turn on a record player, you turn on even a radio.
yeah,
It was only X amount of time. There's people
that's
are going
right.
to school all day with an earpiece in, listening to music. So it's a
Yeah,
part of their lives more than ever.
yeah,
And you just listen to it. And I always would say this: is every secular song in the world horrible? Probably not. Is a large percentage of them? Probably. But
yeah,
how many people are going to
yeah.
take chances on that and say, I'm going to look through all the
That's right.
lyrics, I'm going to make sure each song is? Nobody has time for that. And so when
Yeah,
you
and
talk about, what was
yeah,
that?
sorry to cut you off. And just because something is not bad, just because something seems good,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean it's from God, right?
Amen.
And just because, what could you be using that time for? What are you feeding? What are you feeding your spirit? What are you feeding your mind? Because some might play everybody likes to say, it's not technically a sin. It's not, it's just, I'm like, yeah, it's not technically, but is it building you? Because if it's not building you, what is it doing?
Yep. That's a huge point. And I think another aspect too that I think is key is a lot of people will look at it and say, well, Christian music isn't good. I'll have 2 points to that. My first one is I know myself back when I listened to secular music, and I would have said this, I did say the same exact thing. It takes some changing. But at the same time, in 2026 right now, every genre you like, whether that be rap, that be country, that be just generic worship music that we all know and we talk about, there is
Mm,
good versions. There's so many great artists in each and
yeah,
every single category that you can fill yourself with Christian music.
that's
I
right.
think a huge thing that people will say is, "Hey, country music's fine. It's not talking about killing people like rap is. It's not talking about just drugs, but they're still
Mm,
talking about getting drunk in a lot of songs. They're talking about women in a
mm,
lot of ways." And so when you just
mm.
look at that aspect, how bad and how detrimental is it to a person? They're filling their minds up constantly with these things of whether that be drunkenness in country songs, that
Yeah.
be drugs and rap, whatever it is. How detrimental is that to a human being?
Yeah, of course. It has a great effect on you. And it's like, honestly, man, it's like, what are you feeding your spirit? What
Hmm.
are you feed? If you had a spiritual diet, what are you feeding your spirit? And I'm not saying, every, once a week, once every now and then, I can hear, I can listen to that song I heard on the radio. Cool, awesome. But
Right.
what are you feeding your spirit every single day? You have to be intentional.
Hmm.
What it's like, you can be a guy that, eats healthy, but goes to Macca's once a month. It's not about it's about what are you feeding your spirit, because
Hmm.
it's it's just like it's a diet. What are you putting in your soul? For me personally, I can't afford to feed my spirit that stuff. I just can't. I got too much spiritual warfare happening. God has called me to do too much, and I can't afford to waste time. I have to fill my spirit so I can preach the gospel, so I can lead people to His presence, and I just want God to use me. And for Him to use me, I have to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And for me to have the Holy Spirit, I have to worship Him. I have to spend time in His presence, and I can't be filling my spirit with that crap. Whether I'm just listening for the music or not, it's not just a song, it's a worship song. It's worshiping something. It's either worshiping sex, it's worshiping a woman, it's worshiping some, unholy love, gay like Sam Smith, encouraging cheating,
Hmm.
and it's worshiping something.
Yep.
And and my thing is, if it's not worshiping God, what is it worshiping?
Right.
And why why do you and another deeper question, why do you not why does your spirit not feel like worshiping God?
Hmm.
That's a reflection of your spiritual condition.
Yeah.
When I wake up in the morning, I want to worship God. I don't want to listen to rubbish. I don't care how good it sounds. Trust me, I'm a musician and I love good music. And I don't care how good it is, how catchy it is. If it's not feeding my spirit, if it's not feeding my soul, I'm not going to listen to that crap.
Mm. Now, I'm curious on this other kind of just topic I've had and a question now. I kind of stand on the side of, a lot of people would say traditional worship, the music you're going to sing at most churches today. And there'll be a lot of
Mm.
people. I had a guest on a little bit ago say, you know what? That kind of worship music just isn't necessarily for me to want to listen to 24/7. I get the context of it in a church or whatever it is, but I want to listen to country. I like those type of beats different, the melodies different. Is it something that you believe that as long as it glorifies God with the words in which it says, like I'll say country, for example, Ben Fuller is obviously a great artist, and there's many others along those lines. Is that something that's okay, or is it just a traditional worship's the only place that you should really listen to?
It's song by song. Like, I, if I ever listen to a song, I check every single lyric. I'm
Okay.
like, if it has some messed up stuff, I'm not listening to it. I was and honestly, it's not like a legalistic. You have to listen to that many songs of that many songs of that.
Right.
It's like it's a matter of yeah, find stuff that feeds your spirit. I don't care what genre you choose. Choose
Right.
whatever genre you want. It doesn't have to be whatever genre, but the lyrics are important. The lyrics you listen to are important, and you can listen to songs that are not about Jesus. Go for it. It's fine, but the question is, what lyrics is it saying? And that's number one. And how often do you listen to that? And
Mhm.
why do you listen to that? Is there a purpose to listening to that? And if the purpose is just entertainment, okay, how long is that entertainment?
Mm.
And how long is that entertainment in comparison to the amount that you worship? Is it longer? If it is, why? Because God gave you time, He gave you a purpose, and you're called to do everything for a purpose. Everything I do has a purpose. When I rest on my day off, is a purpose, so I can serve God more the rest of the week.
Right.
When I'm driving to church in the morning, going to work, I play worship. Why? The purpose is to fill my spirit. And everything you do needs a purpose. And entertainment can be something, but the question is how frequently and how long and how often does it compare to, and how much does it compare to the time you spend in God's word and worshiping God? Like, I'll be honest with you, like sometimes on my day off, I like to go to cinema, I like to watch a movie, I like to see where things are at. I like to see where the world is at. Because so I can, see where the world is at, so I can preach to that, I can combat the culture. And the question isn't, am I watching a movie? It's like, how often am I doing that? Is this my daily thing, or am I watching it with a purpose?
Great points. In terms of the actual act of worship, I think so many people neglect that. I can say myself for a very, very long time, I go to church and I sit there with my hands crossed in front of me and, let's listen to the 3 songs till it's over with and whatnot. Once I got saved, you start to really experience what worship is, whether that be by yourself at a church setting, just the concept of worshiping, praising God. For those that are listening to this and say, you know what, I feel not comfortable, it's not my music, whatever it is, just how powerful is the act of singing songs of praise to God?
Yeah, man, this is powerful. Worship is so powerful. Back in the Old Testament, their worship determined whether they won or lost a war. My friend Sean Foyt, I don't know if you know him.
Yeah.
He's an amazing man. He was just with us here in Sydney. We're worshiping over Sydney. And he was just at President Trump's house in Mar-a-Lago 2 days ago. And hours before President Trump was shot at, he was leading worship there. And he saw Trump there. And hours before Trump was shot at and the guy didn't get him, they were worshiping. And I believe that worship has power. Worship has spiritual protection. Worship is a weapon. Worship is spiritual warfare. And I was in Israel a few months ago, and one thing the Muslims do there very well is that 5 times a day across the city of Jerusalem, across the land of Israel, you hear the worship.
Yep.
Not to Jesus, to Allah. You hear Allahu Akbar 5 times a day. You hear it in every street corner. You hear Allahu Akbar. And that's spiritual warfare. And I remember there we were worshiping, we were singing the name of Jesus when we're at the garden tomb where Jesus was buried. We're singing and worshiping, and we're singing the name of Jesus. And on the other side, we could hear the mosque singing the name of Allah, and it was this live spiritual warfare, because the devil understands the power of worship. The devil understands the power of declaring the name of the God over a nation, over a country, over a city. There is power in that. And we're not just atheists that just believe in voting for the right candidate and doing the right thing. Of course, we believe in doing the right things and speaking the truth, but we also believe in worship. We believe in the spirit. We believe in the unseen. We believe in the spiritual. We're not, it says that Jesus was filled with grace and truth, but Bible says the Father is looking for worshipers that will worship Him in spirit and in truth. Not just in truth, not just preaching the Bible, but actually worshiping in the spirit. And worship is saying, God, I'm doing what I can in the natural, but right now, I'm stopping my work like a Sabbath. I'm stopping my work and I'm singing because I believe that your work is more powerful and important than my work. From an atheistic PV, it sounds stupid, right? Why aren't you working? Why aren't you fighting? Why aren't you doing something? You're just singing. An atheist would look at you and be like, you're crazy. What are you doing? You could be running a business. You could be making money. What are you doing? These Christians are crazy. But from a spiritual POV, you're not crazy. You're having room and allowing God to fight your battles. And what you see is these two extremes, right? You got the super spirit guys that they just worship and no action.
Right.
The Bible says faith without actions is dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's just, the worship is like it's like when Jesus says to the Pharisees, these people worship me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. It's not about singing songs. Your actions, your life has to match your worship. And that's a huge thing happening in America in the worship industry. They're very good at singing songs. They're very good at winning Grammys. They're very good at selling records, at filling stadiums, at selling albums. But they're not very good at living out their worship. They're not very good at speaking out the truth. They're not very good at fighting for the unborn that are getting killed in the womb. They're not very good at that. Why? Because it's going to hurt my album sales.
I've
And
never thought of it like that. That's a huge thing.
let's be honest. Honestly, one of the very few amazing worship artists, Sean Foyt, he's one of the very few that actually is not ashamed of his faith.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Look, go to your average worship artist page.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. My next album. Check my next tour. Check my next song. It's like, I'm like, your brother in Christ, Charlie Kirk, just got shot. For proclaiming his faith. Now, just check my next album. Check my next tour. Christian Nigeria getting killed by Muslims. Your brothers and sisters in Christ are getting killed. Speak up for them. No, my next album. Check my next tour. Check my next song. Babies are getting aborted. No, I don't want to. I want to keep my customers. I want to stay out of politics, apolitical. Don't offend nobody. Let's keep both sides of the aisle. The progressive Christian and the conservative Christians. Let's just make songs, and they've made worship this song that doesn't mean anything. Jesus said, "These people worship me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." So the Father's looking for people that are going to worship Him in spirit and in truth. Not just songs. Your life has to match your songs. If it's just a song, then you're just a hypocrite.
Do you think this has always been a problem? I don't know music history that well, or has this, this obvious America business aspect, has this changed
I think
everything?
America's gotten darker than ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as America's getting darker, the need for light is more desperate than ever.
Yeah.
And I think there's a huge gap in the worship industry, and I just don't think they're worshiping God in spirit and in truth. Jesus said, I want mercy, not sacrifice. What was he saying? He's like, keep your sacrifice at the altar. Keep your songs to yourself. If you're not going to show mercy and speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, babies being aborted in the womb before they're even born, babies getting butchered and chopped up, and you're not speaking about it, keep your sacrifice to yourself. He says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And, you want to hear something funny? In Germany, during the Nazi Germany, it was a little bit similar to the times we have now, and the churches were very scared and weak. And one of the things they would do as the trains would drive by outside carrying all the Jewish people to the Holocaust to be killed,
Right.
is that the churches and the singers, they would sing louder. Why? Because so they don't hear it.
Wow.
They're like, we're worshiping God. I'm like, what about the millions of Jews about to get killed? Are you going to speak up for them? No, we're not. Most churches were scared. Most churches were silent. Most Christians were weak and scared of Hitler. And there was 3 types of churches: the Nazified church, the church that stood with Hitler. There was the silent church, which is the churches that just stay silent, just sang their song, sang louder, blocked their ears. Nothing is happening. I don't want to hear about it. Don't tell me about it. Babies are not dying. Jews are not getting killed. Don't tell me about it. And then there was the confessing church, which was the one that spoke the truth and stood against Hitler. And one of the prominent pastors that you know about, his name is Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Okay.
They just made a movie about him. He was the one that stood up against Hitler. He was one of the very few pastors that did, and he ended up getting hung and killed by Hitler for doing that. So it's not new. Nothing is new under the sun. And yeah, I think we live in a time where in the American worship industry, they just want they're singing all these kumbayas, but they're not living what they're singing, and they're not showing mercy.
You know, you've said it. I don't know if it was a clip I saw or a segment in one of your messages, but at some point I believe you said that there's not just worship problems and all these different problems we've discussed, obviously just from pastor speaking and preaching and all these different aspects, but there's more so a lordship problem. And I think this really comes down to it, is that each of these industries, while there is complaints and there's issues, which we just talked about, multiple different categories across the Christian faith over the past hour now, but I think a lot of it just comes to so many people aren't truly following the biblical God of the Bible. We're not following the one true King fully. We're not truly serving him. Because I think if once you surrender to God fully, it is everything you do is now done for the glory of him. If that is going to be a businessman, everything goes towards him in that regard. If that is a musician, if that is an athlete, if that's a pastor, it's giving everything over to him. That might look different for each person, but it's an obedience to him. And I think that we're seeing, whether that be a pastor, a musician, or any other aspect we've talked about, we're not truly reflecting the one true King the way we're supposed to. Would you say that's an accurate description, an accurate issue we have right now? The root cause?
Yeah, 100%. I think the Christian industry is a business, right? There's so many Christians, and it's just an industry, man. Like there's just so many Christians, and that whole Christian music industry, at the end of the day, it's just an industry for a lot of people. It's just, and I think Jesus said it best. He said, "If you love me, you obey my commands," right? Sometimes we try to overcomplicate things, and he doesn't mean it. They love him, but they're trying. But I'm like, Jesus said it very clearly. If you love me, obey my commands. If you love me, feed my sheep. And the measure I use is very simple. Is that person speaking the truth of the Bible? Number 2, are they obeying the commands of Jesus? If that's not happening, then there's no Holy Spirit, and it's not Spirit-led, because the Holy Spirit has fruits, and if the fruits are not there, then the Holy Spirit is not there.
You said in the Set Me on Fire series, you talked about how God's fire shows up during sacrifices. If you were to say, and I know this comes for each person differently, we all have to make our own sacrifices to him in some way, shape, or form, but at large, what do you think would be the most specific sacrifice the modern Western church, modern Western Christians must, they might be afraid to do so, but they must lay that on the altar to surrender to God right now in today's world?
I think they need to have the courage to speak the truth, no matter what the cost. I think churches today, pastors are scared to speak the truth. They're scared to lose congregation members. They're scared to offend some people. They're scared they're going to lose a little bit of tithing, a little bit of bums on seats. And what they need to do, the most important thing they need to do, we live in a time where they need to speak up. They need to speak the truth. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. There's 2 types of sins. There's a sin of commission, where you commit a sin, where you do what you shouldn't have done. But there's also the sin of omission, where you fail to do your duty. And right now, the church at large in America, most churches are failing to speak up. They're failing to do their duty. They're failing to speak up for the unborn. They're failing to speak up against the evil, wicked things of our time, against the pride parade, against the indoctrination of our children, against sexualization of kids, what the LGBTQ plus, the stuff they teach in schools. Many churches are not speaking about that because they want to be loving against abortion, against all these evil things of our demonic world, against Islam, against all these demonic things, you need to have the courage to speak up. If you don't speak up, God's Spirit is going to leave and your ministry is going to get destroyed. They need to speak up.
Amen. Well, John, I got a couple of things before I let you go. One of which is this. I know I have great appreciation for what you are doing as well as your brothers at Echo Church. But for those that have just listened to the past hour now, hear you talk, I'm sure they fell in love with you as well. How can they find you guys? I know we talked about in Sydney, possibly coming to Florida. What's the future look like of the church? How can people find yourself, your family? Just kind of give people insight how they can get a hold of you guys and check you guys out.
Yes, definitely. We are on every social media platform. We are on Instagram, X, Threads, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. You can find us on every single social. John Sedra, my brother Andrew Sedra, my other brother Martin Sedra, Echo Church. Physically, we're here in Sydney, but we're also going to be planting in Florida, Orlando in the next year. And follow us, Echo Church YouTube. Find us online, Echo Church Sydney, and follow us and pray that God will impact your life.
I love that. Well, John, my final question I wrap up every single interview with is talking about legacy. Obviously, our goal as Christians one day is that we're going to get called home to Jesus. It's going to be the greatest day of our life. And so for that, I know God's still got a lot of stuff to get done with you here on this world. But when that day does come, what do you want the legacy of John Sedra to be? What do you want to be remembered for what you did for his kingdom?
I want to be remembered for taking territory from the kingdom of hell. I want to be remembered for taking cities, nations, and generations, taking them from the evil, demonic God of this world, from Islam, from progressivism, from the LGBT, and turning them back to Jesus. Taking territory from the devil, from the kingdom of hell, and claiming it back to Jesus. New York City, Israel, LA, any city that the devil is working at, which is every single city, we want to take these back and claim them for Jesus. UK, Sydney, Australia, Europe, Egypt. We want to take back what belongs to God, back from the devil.
I love that. Well, John, it has been a blessing, a privilege, and an honor having you on the show today. I cannot wait to see how God continues to work in and through you guys.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Zach.
Of course, you're always welcome on, John. God bless.
God bless you.
If this conversation blessed you today, please hit the like button and subscribe. It genuinely helps YouTube push this message to more people who need to hear it. If you're listening on audio, a 5-star review is a huge help. Share this episode with a friend or family member who needs encouragement and let me know your thoughts in the comments. God bless, and I'll see you in the next one.